Okay, Leslie, you are there, correct?
Unmute, yes.
Hey,
Hi, good morning.
fantastic. Well, hey, good morning, everyone. We've got quite an agenda this morning, so I think we will just dive right in. Leslie Barstow is the Community Relations Manager for the Port, and she has some news for us on the sub area plan out there and maybe a little bit of a call to action for this group. So, Leslie, good morning, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Tara. Can I share my screen real quick?
You may.
Okay. Tell me when you see it.
We do. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you. Leslie Barstow, Community Relations Manager at the Port of Tacoma. Just a quick update on the Tacoma Tideflats Subarea Plan. The consultant that was hired to work with the 5 governments that are working on this, put this little quick slideshow together. And so I'm just going to kind of go through it quickly. It's a pretty short little presentation. And then if at the end of it, you're going to be encouraged to take a survey that's out right now. And if you also want to share any comments with me today, I'd be happy to capture those as we go through this. So the study area of the Tideflats Subarea Plan is the 5,000 acres that make up the Tacoma Tideflats. This area is not all the Port of Tacoma. We own about half of the land in this area. A lot of that land is in the docks where the ships come in, some warehouse properties, and we have some habitat sites in this area. But what that means is the other half of the land is owned by private companies on private property, or it's land owned by the Puyallup tribe. And the interconnectedness of the Tideflats to the entire region is something that I really can't stress enough. I think it's important to remember that actually, if you look around wherever you're sitting right now, the furniture, your clothes, a lot of your food probably came through the Port of Tacoma. So having the port be healthy and the businesses in the Tideflat area be healthy, it's really important. And your feedback is really important. This presentation is going out to community groups and educators and nonprofits. And we just want to make sure that as many people have an opportunity to give feedback as possible. So these are the 5 governments that are involved in this vision: the City of Tacoma, the Port of Tacoma, the Puyallup Tribe of Indians, Pierce County, and the City of Fife. It's going to take a hard look at zoning and regulations in the Tideflat area. And then ultimately, when we get sort of to the end of this process, it will be the City of Tacoma City Council that will approve whatever the sub-area plan looks like at that point, and whatever recommendations they decide to go with as far as how it's creating an approach to land use, again, environmental review, and just what does that regulation environment look like. This is kind of why it's important to all of us, actually, because this is also giving you a little bit broader scope as to what this is actually going to include. The topics that you see listed there they've been going through a visioning plan, and you're going to see a slide with a whole bunch of dates on it that have already passed, because they broke each one of these down and did a visioning session on each one. But I don't want you to think that doesn't mean you can't still weigh in and make your voice heard. And again, as this is going out to a lot of different types of organizations, it's really important that the business community and other voices are heard. And we want to make sure that you're still able to comment on all of these things. This is also going to include SEPA environmental review, the Growth Management Act, Shoreline Management Act, land claim settlement, and the container port elements for certification of the manufacturing industrial center. So it's all very important stuff that they're looking at. So these are kind of the main questions that they're trying to get answers to or get feedback on. Again, if you want to share thoughts on any of these questions that you have with me today, that's great. otherwise I would really encourage you, and I'm going to put the link to the survey at the end, to take the survey. I don't think it's about a 10-minute process, but it's got a lot more in-depth questions. And these are a lot of things that they really do need feedback from all different communities on. So here's your dates that have largely passed. They did the visioning sessions on all of these other different elements. And again, when you go to the survey, they're all broken down into those same categories. So you still get to weigh in on each one of those. And I took this is just a screenshot of what the survey landing page looks like. You can see there's different tabs that have a little bit of background, overview of the tide flats, and then each of those groups: environmental health, land use, economic development, transportation infrastructure. And then here's the little survey tab. So if you want to read some of the background, that information there, that's great. But then if you want to just go to the survey tab, please do, and take that so that we can get, again, a wide variety of voices weighing in on this process. And that is the end of my little slideshow. Told you it was short.
Nice. Are there any questions for Leslie? I will follow back up with you, Leslie, to make sure I can push that information out to this group. And I do encourage you all to voice. We obviously have quite a bit at stake here with our MIC, and would love to hear from all of you.
Yeah,
Hey,
and I'll
Tara.
stick the link in the slideshow.
Hi, Sean.
Good
Hello.
morning. Can I add one additional just comment there? And I want to emphasize the importance of the business community to weigh in. There are lots of entities that are sharing their opinions. They are not always necessarily members of the business community, nor are they always friendly towards the business community.
Mm-hmm.
So I would really like to underscore the importance of folks that are on this call and other members of the chamber to share their perspectives as well. For those of you that are not familiar with SEPA, SEPA is the State Environmental Process Act. It's the process by which anytime there's a new development or a land use regulation, the process you have to go through to consider all the different alternatives. And as part of this process, there are alternatives on the table. Some of those alternatives include the elimination of the manufacturing industrial center and the return of the entire Tacoma tide flats to a pre-Columbian time where it is a giant mud flat. So all of the employment that is there under one of the alternatives would be to go away. Now, there are some folks who are going to come in and share their perspectives on that. If you have a perspective on that, it might be helpful for you to share those perspectives. I don't have an opinion which way you would like on that question. That's up to you. But I would just suggest that there are a lot of folks that are sharing their thoughts, and they may or may not have the same opinions and perspectives as you do. And
Like
so,
the dog park. We heard a comment about it should all be a dog park.
Yep.
So if you have perspectives, maybe, again, Tara, if you can push that survey out, it is real quick and it's not in depth. It's more of like, what's most important to you? If most important thing to you is dog parks, great. If the most important thing is jobs, economic robustness, what have you, those might be things you might wish to share as well. So this is dry stuff, but I hate to say it, the implications are enormous, and I will leave it at that.
Well, thanks for putting an exclamation point on it. I appreciate it, Sean. Thank you.
Just a quick question. The 5 entities that own property in the tide flats area, in the overall control of the tide flats and all that kind of thing, do they have like an equal vote, or do they just control the property that they own? How does that work out in terms of overall infrastructure and moving forward with different things like the 167 corridor coming on down in there to connect to the port, all that type of thing?
Leslie, do you want to take that, or do you want me to take a shot at that?
That's a long answer. It's a little complicated. All the 5 entities don't own property in the Tide Flats. They are all stakeholders of that area. You're correct, and there are some entities such as the tribe who will not be governed by whatever the city council determines at the end of this, because they are a sovereign nation. And as far as it affecting the other projects, Sean, I don't think it has any effect on those necessarily, but I'll let you take that.
Yeah, I think we need to separate sort of 3 buckets. There is the 5 co-leads of this project, which were the ones identified on that slide. It's the cities of Fife and Tacoma, the Puyallup tribe, the Port, and Pierce County. Then there is the question of land ownership, and there are many entities that own property on the Tacoma Tide Flats. The Port is one of them. The Port owns about half of the property down there. The Puyallup tribe is another major landholder, and then there are lots of private companies who own their own land. The last question is the regulatory authority. The city ultimately has the regulatory authority. And so at the end of the day, although those 5 entities are participating in the stakeholder process, the sub-area plan is ultimately voted on and approved by the city of Tacoma, and they impose the regulatory authority over non-tribal land. Tribal land is sort of its own thing.
Okay. All right. That's good. Thank you.
So thank you both, Sean and Leslie, for that presentation and your questions. And again, hope all of you will complete the survey. I am very happy to say we have our minority house leader speaker here. There you are, House Representative Wilcox. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we've got a hard stop and start for you, so we'd love to hear some updates from Olympia. Thanks for being here. Oh, I think we've got you on mute.
Most common phrase in America right now. Oops, I'm on mute, or you're on mute, or whatever it is. And you would be amazed how many people here in Olympia, well, they're not here in Olympia, but they're electronically beamed here. When their internet goes out at a strategic moment, the conspiracies kick in immediately. I am pretty much convinced that whenever it happens to me, it's just my own lack of ability to form the habit of unmuting myself. But thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I like Sumner, Puyallup groups. I've got a lot of family history around Puyallup. Some of you may have been around the WSU experiment station in Puyallup. And that's the place where my great-grandfather and great-grandmother alternated to take care of the farm on one day, while the other one took lessons on how to raise chickens in the 1910s at the experiment station. So something really important for us. And we've expressed our gratitude a little bit. If you go in there to a meeting, one of the large meeting rooms is called the Wilcox room, because we do try to pay back a little bit. But Puyallup is one of the last mid-sized cities that I'm aware of that has really maintained their identity. And all of you that are involved in helping that a great medium-sized city do that, I really appreciate. I'm a small town legislator. The little town of Yelm is the biggest city in my district. Ording is close behind them, but there's a lot of value left in these places that have maintained their connection with the small town America that I think a lot of us think is quite meaningful. Here in the legislature, the most important thing to remember is that we have a 105-day session, but the most important day of all happened last November, because in my time in the legislature, the status of majority and minority has become increasingly stark. And almost any contentious bill is going to have a vote that I can predict in advance, 57-41. Parties, especially in the House, have become a lot more cohesive than they used to be. And there's a stronger sense of determination to implement their agenda when they win. And I'm making no bones about this. They won. There's not one election in our caucus that I think was anything but legitimate. And I've taken a lot of slings and arrows for standing up for the fact that in the state of Washington, I think a lot of Kim Wyman. We may not like all of the laws that have been passed that deal with elections, but she's done them fair. And after 10 years of being closely involved in a lot of elections every 2 years, I don't think there's been one where the right, that I've been involved in anyway, where the right winner wasn't picked based on the law. So most things are going to be 57-41 if they come to the floor. And the most important piece of authority that a majority party has is they decide what the agenda is. They decide what's going to get a hearing, and they decide what's going to come to the floor. And a lot of times the two chamber majorities will get together and decide, okay, if we pass this through our chamber, you're going to pass it through your chamber, right? Because it's not easy to pass a contentious bill, even if you have the votes to do it. Some of the things that are the most critical right now have to do with carbon. And something that is very concerning to me is the fact that these carbon pricing schemes are additive. And I and most Republicans represent districts where people live, for the most part, a long ways away from where they work. And that's because we represent places where housing is still somewhat affordable, but we don't have a lot of jobs. And there's a big mismatch in the state between where you can afford to house your family and where the economy is booming. And so the price of carbon is a really big deal to us. And there are three things working together that in the end may add up to 75 cents or $1 per gallon. And because they're all working together, I think that there's a chance that the whole deal may fall apart. And honestly, that would be fine with me. The first one that has passed through the House has been low carbon fuel standards. This is something that over time is set to reduce the amount of carbon net that is released. The challenge is it does add a lot of cost over time, as much as 50 or 60 cents when it's fully implemented. But the low carbon sources of fuel are not from here. They're mostly from outside of Washington and even outside the United States. I think it's difficult to verify exactly how feasible they are. And so our people are going to be paying a lot more for their gas, and the dollar's not going to build roads or bridges or any infrastructure here. They're going to go overseas for other people to plant the crops that, at this point seem to be the most feasible as low carbon fuel sources. So you saw Republicans make a pretty strong effort against that in the House. On top of that, there's something called cap and tax or cap and invest, depending on your perspective. This is a carbon pricing and trading scheme where some people are winners, some people are losers, and the dollars involved are kind of a political football. And that's never a good thing. When you're raising money and the use of it is not specified by the Constitution like it is in a traditional gas tax, I think that's going to change every 2 years based on majorities and who does the best job of lobbying. And then the last is one that I've supported in the past. I won't this time because of this potential of piling one cost on top of another, and that is a gas tax. I feel differently about gas taxes in the long run because they are constitutionally protected. They have to go to build transportation infrastructure. And to me, a tax that builds the hard assets that create a strong economy are different from a tax that just adds to government programs. And so in the future, I think there's a possibility that we get to a gas tax package that would be positive for all of us, but not when all these other things are in play. I think the other biggest thing that's weighing on people that are most concerned with the economy is the budget and the potential for an income tax on capital gains. The budget has passed through each chamber now. The two majorities are negotiating. Currently, both budgets depend on an income tax on capital gains. This is a weird year. We all thought that we were going to have a budget crisis, and it turns out it's a different kind of budget crisis. It's not that we don't have enough money, it's that we've got too much money. There are billions and billions of dollars coming in from the feds, and that is a huge risk. If it goes to build hard assets for the economy, or if it goes to reduce future obligations, I'm 100% in favor of spending those dollars that way. If it simply builds programs that then will be underfunded when the federal dollars are gone, and create a case for a new tax burden for taxpayers, then I think that's a big risk. And to their credit, I think the majorities have chosen something of a middle path. They have done some things that House Republicans would do. And at the same time, I think we are set up for a crash of kind of medium proportions when the federal dollars are running out, and if the capital gains tax is declared to be unconstitutional, as it really plainly seems to be. One other thing that all the parties agree on that have to do with the budget is we don't have a perfect tax system in Washington. No state does. The upside of our tax system is that it's the most stable in the United States because it's based on business volume rather than business margin. It is not quite as sensitive to the economy as an income tax is. And we suffered less uncertainty in our government cash flows as a result of COVID than almost any other state in our country. So we have a stable system, but it really does fall in an unfair way on the lower end of the economic spectrum. But there's a way to fix that. About 13 years ago, Democratic votes passed something called the Working Families Tax Credit. And Republicans were pretty ambivalent about it until we really got thinking through this. And this year, both Republican budgets included fully funding this tax credit for the first time. It had been passed 13 years ago and never once funded. In good times and bad times, they like to have the credit of passing a bill, but they didn't fund it. We did this year, and because of that pressure, I think the majority parties in both caucuses funded that. That is the way to fix a big part of the inequality in our tax system. Rather than just raising taxes on some people, we should drop it on working families that are struggling. And I'm pretty happy about this piece of bipartisan legislation. And there's some other ones that have worked out well too. I think I've used up almost all my time. I've got 5 minutes left before I've got to get into a caucus meeting, and I'd love to take a couple of questions if you have them. Or not.
Where are we at with the workplace violations, the QUETAM?
Well, QUETAM is at this point stuck in committee in the Senate, but nobody is doing a happy dance over that because things can be revived. And let me just clarify that a little bit. There's nobody serious anymore who doesn't think that there's a regulatory role for the government when it comes to safe workplaces and other segments of regulation that involve the relationship between workers and employers. What most of us in my caucus believe is the government is the right person to do the enforcement, and we don't need lawyers running around looking for cases to file. And that's what QUETAM does. It empowers almost anybody with the ability to file lawsuits. I'm fine with them running to the AG and asking them to enforce. And anybody that doubts this AG's zeal in going after private employers hasn't been watching the news.
Thank you.
Representative Wilcox, this is Carmen Gores with Heritage Bank. Can you restate that which you were fully funding or proposing to fully fund?
Yeah, this is the Working Families Tax Credit. And as I mentioned before, Republicans had been a little ambivalent about this, but the more I think about it, the more I think, look, we don't mind voting for tax breaks. I'm talking about Republicans. You know, we like to encourage people that are part of the economy by providing incentives. And if we're willing to do that for business groups, we sure as hell ought to be able to provide that for hardworking families that are in the low wage earner bracket. And so I was kind of happy to see Republicans be pretty strongly supportive of this. And I think because of that, it's going to be implemented regardless of other budget negotiations.
And was there a call to vote on 5355 yesterday? Or is that scheduled for today?
Is that landlord tenant?
No, that's the wage lien.
That was on our briefing list. I don't think it ran yesterday. Do you remember, Cindy?
I was told it was on hold when I took notes in the caucus.
Yeah, okay. We're working on amendments. This is one that's a little bit like KETAM in its impact. Again, no employer should not be paying their employees, and I'm perfectly comfortable with enforcement on that. But if it is really easy for someone to file liens without having to prove that there's a debt, that's something that we're not going to support. And that's what we're afraid is happening with this bill. So I think it is in the works right now. It's possible that it can be amended to being something that is, a reasonable protection. That's not what it is at this point.
And we have an amendment going into at least exempt accounts receivable. So that's good. And hopefully it will take, I don't know.
Yeah. And I'm sure, Carmen, part of your interest in this is if someone can easily place a lien on something that is security for a loan, then all of a sudden, anybody could be out of compliance with their covenants.
That's the beginning of my concerns. Yes.
Yeah. Good question. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you.
And I'm speaking as someone who once in a while has been out of compliance in my former life as a CFO. Okay.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. And by the way, you have just about the best lineup of representation of any district in the state of Washington. Zeiger, of course, we can't call him the kid anymore. He's almost a gray beard, but very, very competent in every way, thoughtful and example for everybody. I hated losing him from the Senate. But Chris Gildon is the calmest person I've ever seen in my life. That may be because he used to work with things that blow up easily. But even though he hasn't been around a long time, he feels like a veteran to everybody. And Kelly and Cindy are worthy replacements. And, we all know that this tradition in the 25th district started with Bruce Dammeyer. Yep. And with him as the example, it's kind of tough to worry about the 25th anymore. Nice job, you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right, well, we're going to roll over a little out of order here. County Councilman Zeiger has also got a bit of a time crunch, so I'll just kick it over to you. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks, Tara. I'm going to make this very quick because I'm about to jump onto the Senate Transportation Committee. This will be my first time testifying in front of the Senate since I was a senator. So they're taking up the newly proposed Senate transportation package, which includes $50 million for Canyon Road. So that is the reason I'm going to be thanking Senator Hobbs for including that in his transportation package. And there are certainly concerns about the revenue sources that Representative Wilcox just described. But I figure if things are moving in the legislature, which I can't guarantee they are, but as far as transportation revenues go, but certainly setting, if nothing else, setting up for the future. We want to make sure that we're getting that $50 million in there for Canyon Road completion, and just for a variety of reasons: freight mobility, connecting Frederickson to the Tideflats, congestion relief. There's some environmental values that go with that, and if we can complete that Canyon Road project, it opens up capacity in the county's road pipeline, because that is the #1 county project, and we got to get that done if we're going to get into any other big county road projects. So that's in a nutshell, and I would encourage the chamber to really make that Canyon Road completion a priority in your advocacy going forward. So I'm going to sign off now. Feel free to get a hold of me, and I would also be interested in getting any input you have about how the county is going to spend the federal money coming our way, which we can get into next month maybe.
That would be great. Thank you so much. Good luck with that today.
Thanks so much. Take care.
You bet. Senator Gildon, too, you've been busy, and busy weekend on budget too. Do you have some updates for us?
Yeah, busy week on budget. We've been, we have 3 budgets that we have to pass every 2 years, every odd numbered year. We have the transportation budget, which funds roads, bridges, ferries, that kind of stuff. We have the capital budget, which funds construction of buildings and maintenance of our buildings. And then we have the operating budget, which is it funds the daily operations of the budget. And it is by far the largest of the three budgets. We had a couple of different, I don't know if do you have the slide that I sent by chance, Tara, or no?
You
If
know,
you don't worry about it.
I had some computer technical
Okay.
technicalities this morning on my laptop at my office.
I'll be very, very brief. There was two competing budgets. Well, let me back up a little bit. The way it works is sometime in November or December, the governor submits his proposed budget to the legislature. We promptly throw that in the recycling bin because we don't really care much what he has to say because we spend the money. We're the legislature. And then we come up with our proposed budgets. And in the Senate, we had two competing budgets. One of them was $59.5 billion, which is about a $7 billion increase from the previous budget. And the other one was about $55.5 billion. There are a number of differences. Tara has a slide that she can share. In the end, the larger budget won out with a 22 to 27 vote. The House has gone through basically the same process. And now, as JT said, the House and the Senate budget negotiators are ironing out the differences. So more to follow on that. Oh, there it is.
Bigger.
Yeah. So you can see their proposal A, 59.5 billion, proposal B, 55.5 billion. The change from last budget, how much it leaves us with an ending savings balance. One, proposal A leaves us with $1 billion in the bank. Proposal B leaves us with $3 billion. Proposal A expends all of our rainy day funds. Proposal B did not. They both fully funded the government. Neither of them had cuts to governmental services. Proposal A relied on a number of tax increases that are assumed. Proposal B actually gave some tax reductions. It actually gave you a tax exemption of the first $250,000 of your home's value for your property taxes. They both funded the working families tax credit that we spoke about previously. And then proposal A gives $500 million to that unemployment assistance so that your unemployment rates don't shoot up so high. And then proposal B sent about $1 million. So that was a high level comparison of the two budgets that we were debating in the Senate. In the end, proposal A won out, like I said, with the 22 to 27 vote coming out of the Senate. I did not support it because I just think we have plenty of money to fully fund government without raising any of your taxes. We had a couple of good things that happened in the Senate recently. Is we just did a resolution honoring the princesses of the Daffodil Court, which I was really happy about. That was fun. And just yesterday in the Senate, we passed a resolution that's going to replace one of our two statues in Washington, D.C. Each state has two statues to represent their state in Statuary Hall. We just voted to replace one of those statues with a new statue of Native American icon Billy Frank Jr. So I think that's going to be something very positive for our state, and I was happy about that. This is the 86th day of the 105-day legislative session, and session is scheduled to be over on April 25th. So a lot of work between now and then, but thank you. That's pretty much all my update for today.
Great. And Representative Jacobson, any added commentary?
I don't have any added commentary for the legislature, but for Puyallup City Council, just saying the library is open, and I'm sure Meredith will cover all the other nuts and bolts about our AOB lot sale and all that other stuff. Thank you.
Great. We also have today Carmen Goers, and she is on our executive team for our South Sound Chamber of Commerce Legislative Coalition. She and I participate on calls every Friday with our lobbyist, Carolyn Logue. She is the VP at Heritage Bank and has just a little bit of a summary of what our coalition has been tracking. If there's anything we may not have already touched upon, perhaps Carmen, you can speak to that.
Well, I do want to echo Sean's response about having the business voice heard. And as you may get emails with urgent calls to action, to the best of your ability, have you or a designated person within the organization let our legislators and electeds know our position on those bills, such as 5355, which is a bill that essentially, in summary, employees can simply file a wage lien without any proof that wage claim is valid. That immediately puts the employer's property at risk. And so it's that's just a one line. There's many more lines in there, but that would be a call to action to let them know, as stated, it has not been voted on at this point in time, but to give that perspective. I feel it's, we all feel it's important for various reasons. On behalf of your lenders, please, it'd be helpful. Secondly, Carolyn, I'm looking at prepared notes here. So Carolyn sends out a weekly list of bills that we're tracking, where they're going. And as any given year, it's busier than we thought it was going to be. In addition to the budget that we just saw, there is a new transportation proposals with various revenues. Senator Hobbs' bill has relies on a gas tax of about 9.88 cents, and passage passage of the cap and trade bill 55126. So again, if you can make your comments known, that's helpful to support it. For the Connecting Washington and Gateway projects, the new project package do not close the gap in finishing the 167, 509, 405 Puget Sound Gateway project, which is further north from us, but is currently has a gap of about 90 million. And that's important to many of our manufacturing and getting products and services through there. So there's a lot out there. If you have any questions on that report, feel free to forward back to myself or Tara, and we will, specifically look for the answers for you. And April 11th is the next cutoff date, I believe, coming through, which is just 5 days away. So.
No, excellent. Thank you so much for providing that update. I have the very well thought out with great notes and where I guess the status of each of the bills are that I'm sending to this group too. So look for that in your inbox shortly.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Carmen. I appreciate it. All right, let's move to county. Betty Capistani, do you have any updates for us?
I think Councilmember Zeiger mentioned Canyon Road, and then the other piece that he also mentioned, which could be future discussion, we're all looking at the American Rescue Plan and trying to figure out what those rules are. And it appears there's more flexibility on how we spend them and the length of time to spend them. But I think the biggest piece from our county end, and I know others on the call, both Meredith and Ryan, we've had conversations of what can we do that really leverages the greater good and helps move Pierce County forward. And so looking at ways to leverage those investments and try to maximize opportunities for Pierce County. And so those buckets are still being defined and everyone's having different conversations, but we're just trying to figure out, are there areas of broadband? Are there areas of infrastructure? Are there areas of jobs that we can attract to higher paying jobs? What can we do in addition to whatever we need to do, bootstrap up, but we feel like there'll probably be less of that since we're kind of turning the curve. And as long as we can keep in our current phase and not roll back, there's a lot of momentum going for our companies.
And I guess we've all been hearing a little bit of whispers. Is there any official, unofficial word on what we can do right now with that potential of rolling back to phase 2? I know I was asked to be on a call tomorrow with some chambers and AWB with the governor. Is there any official word from the county on anything yet?
Well, there's no official word. I would tell you from an economic development person, the economic health of the economy is really important. I believe, and you could double check, I think David Schrodel has some pretty good numbers that it's the younger people that are the large case count right now. So I think trying to figure out how we get shots and arms and have that be the focus versus, I mean, I don't know that our restaurants can take rolling back again. They just started to hire, they've gotten all their food. It's really unfair in that piece. So trying to figure out how we can get it to a win-win, both in getting the vaccinations. And I think some of the commercials have been kind of going that way too, trying to get the young people to pay more attention. And I understand that it's been a year. I have young kids. I know I have college kids. I know they've been cooped up for a year and they're ready to party at springtime. Anyway, that I guess just looking at it from the economic health would be really important.
Yep, I appreciate your insight. Thank you. Okay, let's go to the city of Puyallup. Let's see, I know we have Meredith. Hello, and I have Jeff Wilson. Yeah. Love to hear any updates.
That's, it's always great to follow Betty on these. I think that her mentioning sort of the momentum right now, and also the side concern about whether we might slide back to phase 2 and what that might do specifically to our restaurants. I think, going to 25% capacity for retail isn't quite as dire, but restaurants really have just started sort of hitting their stride and coming back. And 25% capacity at a restaurant is just so difficult for most of them. What's been interesting is that what we've seen in Puyallup is that a few of our restaurants have hosted vaccination events for all of their staff, where they've teamed up with Kirk's Pharmacy and they've invited all of the other restaurants. So like most of the restaurants in downtown Puyallup all went to a vaccination event that was a privately hosted one at Charlie's Restaurant. So I think it's pretty awesome to see that they're kind of taking the lead there for those of their staff that are interested in getting the vaccination to do it in a way where it doesn't impact their workday and gets as many of them vaccinated as possible. On the reopening, there's a lot of energy being spent right now on what reopening means and what it will look like. So as Cindy mentioned, the Puyallup Library opened its doors last week on April 1st to the public. They had been closed for over a year, so this was something that was very exciting to help support the library staff in that. I know there was a little bit of concern about it, but with a week under their belt now, they're feeling pretty good about it. They've discovered that people really love curbside drive-through pickup, and so they're going to keep that open as well, probably for the rest of their operating days. And then, there are things like the Puyallup Farmers Market, which is reopening this weekend on April 10th in downtown. It'll be by Meeker Mansion for the first month or so, and then it'll be moving back to Pioneer Park on Mother's Day weekend in May. And so that's kind of another step towards getting back to what looks like normal. There will be some things that aren't still allowed, but each step along the way. And then of course the Spring Fair is opening tomorrow, and we're super excited about that, and just generating some local revenue and bringing people back together in our community in a safe way. So, props to the fair. That I'm sure has been a heavy lift to try to figure out how to make that happen. As I'm sure I've mentioned before, the city really has been tracking sales tax data during the last year to watch the economic health of our local businesses. So, the good news is that we've had a really solid start to this year. Tax collections are up about 3.8% over last year. And retail, trade, and professional services remain a really solid foundation in that. It's about 83% of our sales tax revenues. And so that includes car sales, which is about 40% of our retail sales overall. So it's great to see that our car dealerships are doing well and that people are buying cars. And the two sectors that have been the most negatively impacted are construction and hospitality, so food and accommodations. So year-to-date revenues, construction is down about 26.5%, and hospitality, which is our hotels and our restaurants, is down 28.4% over last year from this time. So, and that's year-to-date. Interestingly, or maybe not surprisingly, the sector that's doing the best this year so far is manufacturing, wholesale, transportation, and warehousing, which is up almost 30% year-to-date over last year. And so I think we're really seeing that there's a lot of movement happening there, talking to Leslie's point about the port and how intricately tied it is to everything. We're seeing a lot more movement in our warehousing, and as people are opening up and ordering online and doing all sorts of things, it's interesting to track. So, I would say on that front, we're sort of cautiously optimistic that most of the sectors are bouncing back, and that with increased infrastructure funding that we're looking at most likely coming out of some of the federal funding, that hopefully that will help kickstart the construction industry, and that as we move through the phases and have more reopening, the lifting of those things might help our hospitality sector. The last thing I would mention is that right now, from an economic development lens at the city, one of the things that we're really focusing on is setting the stage for downtown redevelopment and for infrastructure improvements downtown. So as Representative, Council Member Jacobson mentioned, we have a city-owned parcel that's known as the AOB lot that is currently a parking lot across from the police station and behind the library that has been marketed for mixed-use housing of a higher density. So far, we've received, and I'll answer your question in a second, Kurt, or I'll try to. We've received 4 letters of intent from developers for that parcel, and we'll be working through that process. And I think one thing that I would note on there is that we got a lot of calls and a lot of interest from developers who haven't previously invested in Pierce County. And most of them said that they're paying attention to Pierce County now because of the growth in rents and the growth in home prices that make a project here more financially feasible. And so I think that's a really interesting thing that people who have never paid attention before are starting to become curious. So we'll have more to follow on that as we move through that process. And then we are also in the process of selecting a consultant team right now that's going to be creating a downtown streetscape and infrastructure plan, which will guide investments in the next 10 years for downtown improvements, everything from street down to street up, and that'll include, signage and furniture and street lights and trees and all sorts of other fun things. And those will all be with an eye towards improvements that the city can do that will help support private economic investment. And so Kurt asked what market type in your construction numbers are down. So that's overall, and I can check with my finance team to break it down a little bit more for me. I think a lot of it was in the smaller side of things, and I'm wondering, we've seen a lot of new construction companies starting that are single companies. I think we had 400 of them that opened last year that were new construction companies. So, and most of those are one person. And so I think we're seeing people who are displaced from the workforce and are opening their own businesses and aren't actually making money. So that might be some of that, some of those dollars, but I will certainly take a look at that and report back next time. And I think that's it for me. Jeff, do you have any?
Well, thanks. Hopefully I'm off mute. Thanks, Meredith. Yeah, I mean, we're still seeing a lot of construction activity occurring right now. We just ended our cycle for when we get our new comp plan amendment requests, and we've only received one, which on the positive side is going to free up some of our time to work on code amendments where we can go through and try and streamline some of the things to help the industry and find some impediments in there and try and reduce some of the constraints that are currently designed into our code. So we'll be able to work on those items later this year. There's also some efforts going on right now, primarily through efforts in our Public Works Department, but we're working on taking a look at our street frontage improvement requirements. This is when properties redevelop, what they're responsible for in terms of their costs of putting in new street frontage improvements. And we're trying to find a more balanced approach to that, because right now it seems like it's had some disparate impacts, especially the smaller projects. So been working with a group that we formed that's been formed for a couple of years called the Puyallup Partnership, working with members from the NBA to kind of go through and look at those items and see where we can come up with a more balanced approach that is going to help spur development, especially in the areas in the downtown, but in other parts of the city where street improvements are required. But it's saying, so simplifying that process, reducing some of the burdens so it'll have a more positive impact. So those are the efforts that are ongoing right now. And I think that we get to back out a little bit and not have a lot of major comp plan amendments will allow us to spend more time on working on our code and fixing some of the problems in there.
Great. Well, thank you. So Meredith and Jeff are both panel speakers on our upcoming economic forecast. And I know there's a lot of interesting data coming out of Puyallup. So we look forward to hearing from both of you. And as always, thank you for joining us this morning. All right, Mayor Pugh and Ryan Windisch, how are we doing in Sumner?
Life is beautiful. Go ahead, Ryan. Go through the list and I'll see what you missed.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So I'm Ryan Windisch, Community Development Director for the City of Sumner, and we are our city administrator. It seems like every time we have any kind of a staff meeting, he says we are really busy, and I would echo that. In terms of some things that we've been looking at, around affordable housing. I mean, we've talked a little bit here. I heard some comments about, we know housing and housing our workforce is really important. And we all know the affordability of housing seems to be getting more and more difficult every passing week. And so we are working on an affordable housing action plan, which is just that. A lot of jurisdictions are working on these. It will outline numerous different actions that the council could implement to improve the availability and possibility for affordable housing. Things like looking at our accessory dwelling unit standards. Do we allow tiny homes or not? As Jeff Wilson was saying, do we look at our infrastructure requirements? Those kinds of things are on that list. And the council had a briefing on it on Monday, and they'll be looking at taking action next month. We're also looking at an interlocal agreement with the South Sound Housing Affordability Partnership that takes, of course, a more of a regional approach, because Sumner's not going to solve all the affordability issues just in Sumner all by ourselves. And we want to look at this as a regional approach as well. I've mentioned this before, but our Main Street visioning effort continues. Sometimes I feel like we're living parallel lives, me and Meredith. It's a similar approach to taking a look at our, not just Main Street downtown, our historic downtown, but also Heritage Park. And then one of the really cool concepts that the students have come up with, because we've been working with the UW Urban Design Studio class, is how do we activate our alleys, both north and south of Main Street. And I don't know if any of you have experienced Post Alley up in Seattle. I don't know if we'll get to a Post Alley, but we can get to something more enjoyable and activated, we hope. So we're looking forward to some more detailed plans coming out of the studio class in the spring, now working with BCRA and KPG consulting on that project. The council adopted our 6-year transportation improvement plan, which they do every year. And no surprise, the #1 arterial project is our Stewart Road Bridge project, $30 million project. And #2 on that list is the 166th Avenue interchange. So that was adopted, and we're continuing to pursue funding and pursue design on those projects. A couple of, and another thing that we adopted that I think is important, especially in light of catalytic converter theft, which is just insane. I keep looking under my car every morning to make sure my catalytic converter is still there. We adopted an electric fence code that will allow for industrial and interchange commercial properties owners to put up electric fences that are really a security measure. And they're very effective. And the council went through and approved that last night, actually. A couple of exciting things on the development front. And I've mentioned this a number of times because I'm so excited about this project. But Dobbs Peterbilt broke ground last week. We went out there, golden shovels and the whole bit, a lot of masks and a lot of elbow handshakes, but it was great. We're so excited. It's a 7-acre site, nearly a 70,000 square foot facility. It's also their corporate headquarters for Dobbs Peterbilt, and I believe it's headquarters for at least 9, if not 18 dealerships. So we've got their corporate staff here in Sumner when they get that built. Beautiful view of the mountain too, by the way. So we're excited to have them under construction. Sumner High School, they're doing a massive renovation rebuild over the next few years. They are back in for a conditional use permit on phase 1, which they have funding for currently. They're going out for another bond next time for the rest of the high school in the future. And the last big kind of project, and I've mentioned this a million times too, but the Red Apple Market site, it's now called the Kincaid Avenue Mixed Use Project. They are in for design review, so we're really finally getting to see what's being proposed and the details, and they're going through their SEPA process. So they are, as they promised, underway with their permits in April. And as far as the American Rescue Plan, and the mayor might want to mention this, the council is forming a committee to talk about how we at the city prioritize that money. Mayor, I'm sure I missed a few things. We got so much going on, but I'll.
Well, actually, no, you did great, Ryan. Just a couple other things. You were talking about revenues, and during the last year, actually our revenues we made the original budget and then we reduced it when COVID hit. And then it turns out that our revenues are actually greater than what we had originally projected. And so on the retail side, we're going crazy. And from a construction standpoint, or actually construction sale revenues were up. And that's primarily, due to, activity within the manufacturing industrial center within the MIC. Sometimes wins are a long time coming and they're small, but they can end up being big. On our permitting side, we were always blessed with having our firefighters review the fire portion of building permits. And when it turned out to try to issue the permits, well, what's the holdup for issuing the permits? Well, the fire guys haven't gotten to it yet. And so bless East Pierce Fire and Rescue. We're going to be ending up cutting our relationship with them in terms of permit review, and actually have joined with Pontiac Lake to actually hire a separate staff, and combined we'll be doing that fire permit review. And it'll eliminate one of those roadblocks that has always been there, and I think make a big difference. That and kudos to Ryan. You talked about you're starting your comp plan basis. We're actually be coming up to council, and actually will can't remember when that is, Ryan, but we'll have council taking action to complete all the various comp plan amendments that have been submitted, and that will be done, I think, within the next month, and make some significant changes throughout the city. But anyway, kudos back to Ryan. That's it.
Terrific. All right. A couple minutes for some questions. Of anybody that spoke today. I will take then 20 seconds to tell you about, I don't know necessarily if it's an event, but we are very excited to have newly elected Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland that will be at the Bill Corum's Nissan Puyallup. Very excited. Thank you for hosting, Luke Corum. And essentially it's a business roundtable, if you will. So we have invited our community stakeholders, business owners. We'll need to have a limited audience of attendees. So it is something you need to register for. I am sending right now as we speak to this group a link to register for it. If you'd like to join us, it's this Thursday, April 9th, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. I'll send a link to that. I'll send the, Kurt, you asked me to send that budget comparison. So I'll send that to the group as well that Senator Gildon shared with us. And then I do have the latest on the bills update from our lobbyist, Carolyn Loeb. So all three will be followed up with.
Tara?
Yeah.
Thursday is the 8th, Friday is the 9th.
Thank you for clarification. It is the 8th and it is Thursday. Thank you.
Okay. It's already been a rough situation. Don't get my dates wrong.
Yep. Yep. Okay, guys. Well, hey, so great to see all of you. We will see you also May, again, economic forecast. Be sure to register on Cinco de Mayo. We'll have enchiladas and margaritas of some sort. You may need to bring your own tequila. Mayor Pugh, so disappointed.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Hey, thanks.
Centers. Bye now.